Don't forget to check out Words Don't Do It Justice at WDDIJ.com.
And we are live for the first ever Words Don't Do It Justice podcast. We told you that it was coming. We have now given up the goods. So, first ever podcast, what in the world could we possibly be talking about? Well, this week we are going to have the best possible thing considering what's going on lately. Paying college athletes. What's the effect of the judge's decision allowing for the college students to unionize as college players? And what are the long-term lasting effects this could have on college sports in general. So yes, your favorite college basketball program, your favorite college football programs, we're going to talk about it all. And just because I can't help but be controversial, the Ruthless Wonder has brought in two men to help him discuss the issue of the men going their own way movement, is what they wanted it to be called. Is this a new masculine movement? Is this a counter to feminism? Is this just a bunch of guys who want to be misogynist pricks? Who knows? We know, and we're going to talk about it for you here live. Now, this is your first time, hearing anything from Words Don't Do It Justice. Well, I'll do some explanations. I am, of course, the Ruthless Wonder, and I've brought along two friends, and they're going to introduce themselves here in just a second. And, well, that's what we do here. We talk about subjects, we blog about subjects, and now we podcast about subjects. So, get ready, get set, have some fun, and enjoy our podcast with your friends. Share us with your relatives. Just with that annoying prick down the hall from you. Whatever you want to do. But first up, let's get some introductions to our guests for this particular podcast. First up is Joe. Mr. Watson, if you would, please.
Hi, I'm Joe, better known as Joe Chaos. I'm just your average black guy doing random black guy things at black guy times.
And, of course, from Lenexa, Kansas. He is 6'4", 228 pounds. He is sometimes mistaken for a bird, sometimes mistaken for a plane. He's faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, and able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. This really sounds like a superhero. Anyway, Chris Moncrief. No.
Well, thank you very much for that wonderful intro. My name is Chris Moncrief, a.k.a. Superman, and I am currently a licensed attorney who graduated from the University of Louisville. That's right, defending national champions. Unfortunately, sadly, no longer.
We are all sorry about Louisville losing. Seriously, I hate Kentucky. So, first up, because we can't get to the controversial things too quickly, I want to talk about paying college athletes and the effect on non-major sports, because I think that's the first thing that people forget about when you hear about paying college athletes. Yes, football players are going to get paid. Yes, basketball players are going to get paid. What about the players who are not playing in those sports? And what about the players who are not major skill players in those sports? Recently, of course, the federal courts have said, and it's probably going to get appealed, that because of the National Labor Board decision that college athletes can unionize. So, what effect is paying college athletes really going to have on the non-major sports? That's what we're going to start with. And, of course, we're going to start with Superman himself, Chris Moncrief.
Well, first off, I think we need to definitely clarify what the decision handed down by the National Labor Relations Board was. It was the Chicago district of the board who answered a petition from the Northwestern University football players to allow them to unionize. Now, the interesting thing about that decision is that only was a decision for the football players. So all those other sports at Northwestern still don't have that right to unionize necessarily just yet. And so it will be interesting to see the effects, the trickle-down effect from this decision and this one small group of players being able to unionize. As far as the actual effect of unionization. This could be the first domino to fall, sort of, in the grand scheme of taking down the NCAA and the idea of the student athlete becoming more so the student employee.
And that's certainly true. I mean, however, I think it is a bit understated to say that this is only going to affect those players. While that it's true, legally you're only going to be able to unionize if you're a Northwest College football player. You have to know that there's more coming. Like you said, this is basically the beginning of an avalanche. Where are things going to go from here, kind of thing. So, Joe, you're up, man.
All right. The thing I feel about it, number one, you don't get paid to go to school. That's the main thing. I understand that you can argue that maybe some kids look at it, this is their only way out of their current, might come from a hood situation, if you want to say that. But the whole thing is, you don't get paid to go to school. If everyone got paid to go to school, then everyone would go to school and do school well. Sports should be an extracurricular activity. That's how I was raised. When I played sports, my mom told me you don't get paid to play sports. You go to school for education. You don't get paid to go to school. So the whole thing is, kids can do just enough to scooch by to continue to play sports just to get a check. Therefore, it will diminish our already terrible education level in the world. And the whole thing is, you have to implicate a new system, because you got to think about it. The only kids who can't go straight from high school into a professional sport is football, because football, NFL has a rule to state that you have to do at least 2 years in college ball before you're even ready to try out for NFL. So therefore, that will do nothing but strictly enhance NCAA football. And then you're going to want to factor in, if they're getting paid, you're going to go for rights for NCAA football games, which means students are going to want their rights and have royalties. It'll just be a whole nother big mess and a whole bunch of money that's getting wasted. Because if they start halfway through and scrap the project, then you probably just lost, half a tuition, a whole tuition on bullshit that should never happen before.
All right, Chris, you said you wanted in to comment on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I actually 100% agree with Joe on that topic, in the sense that right now all we're going to see is football, and that's the big sport everybody talks about, because that's the money-making sport, and so that's where the money is to give to athletes. And I 100% agree with Joe. When we went to school, we were paying to go to school. It's a privilege, not a right. And getting paid for the work you do is a right. And so I think the clash of these two things right now is these schools are making money off these kids while these kids are getting an education, and the argument obviously all centers around what's fair. And I think there's definitely a lot to be said for, this country and how we view education when we start talking about the education compensation alone. The getting a scholarship to go to school for free isn't fair enough. Shows a real lack of us as a society caring about higher education in general. Our higher education isn't really that much higher than just a high school diploma nowadays, especially when you look at worldwide and the specialty schools and specialty colleges that many countries have developed already. I think that there's a lot to be said from what Joe said about how our education system already has a lot of flaws, and this is probably going to just reveal quite a few more.
That's certainly a great point. Now let's kind of focus things in a bit on those non-major sports. How do we look at things like women's basketball under Title IX? How do we look at smaller programs like golf? And how do we look at non-major sports that are only non-major at certain schools? For instance, if you go to Iowa, the wrestling program's almost as major as the basketball program is. How do we see the not just the unionization, but the idea of paying college athletes? How do you all see that being affected by well, not by, but how do you see that affecting the non-major sports and the sort of non-traditionally televised sports that might be major at certain schools? I will start with Joe this time since we started with Chris.
That's the thing. That you want, number one, you're gonna have to break down into sections of the United States. Just like how certain sports are popular everywhere else, just like you were saying, it's not gonna factor in college. The second thing, to be honest, women's basketball, I live in the South. I hear no one talk about, did you catch that WNBA game last night? The women's basketball team for local colleges around here barely get any support at all. So therefore, if they start that whole, let's pay students, the women's basketball team will probably be making about as much as a guy who works at McDonald's, which means that's going to start a whole nother thing, because then that can be related back to feminists feeling like, oh, we're not getting paid just as much just because they're a man, when in reality, no one really watches WNBA. Because honestly, WNBA was just given as like, okay, here you go, shut up, here's your sport, now you can feel equal. At least that's how I feel. So just like you were saying, the whole thing of it will honestly be a popularity contest. It will honestly be football, basketball, and maybe baseball, and probably soccer, depending on where you at, will get paid the most. And even then, when you're playing, how are you going to break down the brackets of which player gets paid the most? Like, honestly, you're bringing in more corruption, you're bringing in less grades, you're bringing in just everything. You're going to hear more steroid use, more drug use. You're going to hear just more evil altogether if you implicate that BS that they're trying to.
Words Don't Do It Justice, brought to you by 314 Publishing and Imperial Dreams Productions.
Okay, Chris, before you respond, I want to kind of interject something. What do you both think, and Chris, obviously you'll get to respond first, what do you both think about a uniform fee to all college athletes in a particular sport? So if you play football, you get your scholarship and $300 a month. If you play basketball, no matter what, your importance on the team, you get your scholarship plus $400 a month. Because at schools where basketball is making more than football, and women's basketball gets $100 a month, how do you break it down? A sort of uniform fee per sport going to the athletes? Because the argument, and I know you both have heard this, the argument is constantly that because you're a student athlete, you have to do all the work as a student, but you also have to be constantly at the beck and call of your coaches for practices, for weight training, and for their version of OTAs. You have all of these activities that you're required to do that go beyond what you normally would, and you have all of these restrictions as to everything from diet to time awake and things of that nature. What do you say to a uniform fee that simply says, look, because we know you guys to the movies, get a soda, buy a suit, and things of that nature, because that's what some people have been given violations and banned for, buying certain things with money given to them by coaches or staff members. What do you all say to the inclusion of something like a flat fee per sport situation? Something obviously organized by a potential player union or just on an NCAA basis to kind of keep their legitimacy. And we'll let Chris go first since he was already up to speak.
Yeah, a flat fee is an interesting idea and a dangerous one, I think, because unfortunately that NLRB decision for the Northwestern football players kind of opened Pandora's box. What that's going to allow those players to do now is unionize, and as a union, you get to collectively bargain, much like the collective bargaining agreements dealt with by the NFL and their players, or the NBA and their players. All of a sudden, you've got players who are going to be able to start arguing for not just fees, and in fact, the Northwestern players have come out and said that's not their biggest goal. Their biggest goal is things like benefits, medical coverage, things for the longer term. And then we start getting into the equality matters when we start talking flat fees. And of course, as Joe pointed out, we have so many different areas in the country where certain sports they're not on the radar. Nobody goes to the games. Nobody watches them. Nobody even cares about the sport. I'm not going to, call out any sports in specific, but we all know as a culture, as an American culture, there are things that get put on TV, and there are things that nobody ever sees unless you go to the game or unless you've had a kid playing the sport. And we're going to have cries from all corners about the equality of the fee because all athletes are going to say, well, we all do the hard work. We all put in this extra time. Why can't we be paid the same as any other athlete? And so I think ultimately the flat fee, while probably would have been the best idea, at least in general, because it is clear the football team will probably generate more money than the swim team will, but at the same time, the equality of it, and certainly then we're going to get into the issue of women's sports generally not generating as much revenue as men's sports, so the men's fees would probably generally be higher. Like I said, a Pandora's box of issues gets opened by that decision that allows the Northwestern players to collectively bargain. And what those players decide they really want to bargain for is going to really, I kind of think, set a standard. And ultimately, it's going to hurt, I think, a lot of our smaller schools, a lot of our smaller educations that allow the people that don't normally get to go to school, those smaller colleges, places like, for example, my alma mater, the University of Missouri at Kansas City. It's a small, not a small school, but it is a school that is a part of the University of Missouri system, but the University of Missouri in Columbia is the one that has all the sports teams. The University of Missouri Kansas City is just a local school within Kansas City. Now, if sports and the money to sports becomes such a big factor in students determining where to go and whether or not that school can get the tuition money it needs to keep operating, maybe all of a sudden not a UMKC, but a smaller JUCO school that has sports teams ends up having to close its doors because it can't keep open because it can't pay the players to properly fund them. So I think that there's a lot of issues. And then, of course, once players start getting money, listen, money is green. Green is envy, and people want more. And when somebody sees one person getting more than them, man, it gets ugly real fast. So I think that we're definitely looking at a dangerous line when we're talking about flat fees, because then you're talking equality, or when we're talking about letting the students try to argue what they deserve. Because funny story, even as a kid in college, I didn't know as much as I know now, and I wouldn't have made the right decisions for myself. So I think there is some dangerous ground when you start talking flat fees, for sure.
All right, I think you had a great point there, Chris, and I think Joe's come up with a quick point as well. Go ahead, Joe.
Not to even mention like sponsorships. Like you see all these NFL cats on these commercial stuff like that. Once students start getting paid, then the cream of the crop are all going to get tapped by all these major corporations and all this. And you got NFL teams that are going to try to put a little bug in the ear. Hey, don't you want to come to so and so? We'll offer you this much money, or we'll help you get this sponsorship from Nike before you even come in the league. After a while, it will bring down the integrity of the game, because it brings more corruption. You got people scrambling to be number one just to get more money. And I mean, true, we might enjoy that, but after a while, it'll become nothing but a numbers game. And the whole flat fees thing that Chris was talking about he's correct. That is a bad thing waiting to happen, because just be real. I'm a natural greedy person, so I'm gonna think, if I'm number one, why am I getting paid the same rate as the person who rides the bench all the time? Like, what's my reason for playing the best right now if we're all getting paid the same? and you lose that hunger, that willing to do better, that want, that drive, that potential, that passion of the game. Honestly, it'll just be players showing up and making half-ass plays, and that'll be every sport, no matter what it is. Water polo, they're not even gonna get in the pool. They get paid. Basketball, I'm not gonna make this shot. I get paid. So it's just a terrible thing all around.
It's a good point. Now, before we move on off this topic, totally, let's really address the one lingering part of this. Do you think that this is going to turn more into additional player unions at other schools, a sort of larger overarching per sport player union, or is this going to simply just be the end of the NCAA's no paying players setup? Because we can't unring the bell. Now we're at a point where there really isn't much option to go, well, maybe we can talk these players who've unionized out of unionizing. The NCAA is going to have to abide by the same rule that the NBLE came up with. I honestly think we're in a situation where this is the end of non-compensated college players. It's a matter of degrees now. So what do you think this is going to have as far effect on college student athletes? Are we going to see more unions at other schools? Are we going to see a big player union? What do you guys think in that fashion? And we'll start with Chris since we just last started with. Sorry, we'll start with Joe since we just last started with Chris.
Words don't do it justice. The last Monday of every month at 2:30.
I think more colleges will actually just start to look at what's going on, and they actually start to form their own union. And honestly, we all know what happens when unions don't get what they want. They're going to go on strike. And you have to think about it. If these kids, if Johnny has a scholarship to play basketball, he joins a union and goes on strike. Johnny is currently not doing his end of the bargain to get his school paid. So therefore, Johnny loses his scholarship. Johnny gets kicked out of school. Johnny's working at Burger King when he could have easily been a biochemist. So this whole unionizing and wanting to get paid, I mean, the main question should be, who do you think you are? Like, have you paid your dues? Why do you think you're so special at this point in time? That should be the main question. I understand you go out there and play. I play ball. I went out there. I put my body on the line. I understand it. But at the end of the day, you can't come out the gate wanting to make six figures, wanting to get paid this or that. I was happy just to have my school paid for. That should be the only thing. It shouldn't be, should they get paid? Should they get scholarships? And how much you should get on your scholarship? That's where we need to go.
And that's an interesting point. Before Chris comes in, I want to quickly hop in on that. The whole point of this paying college athletes issue has always been that once you are a college student athlete, you aren't allowed to do certain things other college students are. You're not allowed to get a job and work. You're not allowed to take money from anyone who's affiliated with the university. Your scholarship is limited to whatever you're getting, and that's all. Is the way to fix this simply making everyone's scholarship go up to full ride? That because if you're a student athlete, you're paying the whole way. And I don't know whether that's a solution. I'm just saying, is that an alternative that we should look at, should be pushed forward to eliminate this problem? Because everybody who's ever played a college sport or knows anyone who has will tell you it's really hard to find the money to go do something unless your family's sending it to you, because you can't borrow money from anyone at the school. Your coach makes $5 million a year to coach, your football team with all the bonuses he gets from getting you to a bowl game, but you don't see a dime. So is it really the money, or is it just the access to additional funds to do normal college student things that students really want? And Chris, we're going to go to you before we get off this topic.
Yeah, some great points, Matthew. And I think that the ultimate situation comes down to what are the students going to want. I think a lot is going to be dictated by this first union in Northwestern and what they go after to determine how big of an issue this could be. Joe is absolutely right in that, there's a certain level where you have to cut somebody off and be like, you're a kid, you don't really have bills the way that an adult has bills, so why do you need this money? And ultimately the answer is going to be, well, because I'm a kid and I want to go party and spend money. And that's not the idea. As far as how it's going to span across the country, as far as how is it going to be implemented versus how should it be implemented, I think that we could sit here and spend an hour just talking about the possible alternatives that could be created, whether it be flat fees, whether it be everybody gets a full ride, whether we talk guaranteed scholarships. Joe talked about it a little bit, and it's important to note, a lot of people don't realize these scholarships aren't guaranteed, and so when a player gets hurt, that's it. They're done. They put all their work in, they busted their butt, but you know what? Their knee blew out, and the school's not going to help them out, and their scholarship doesn't get renewed, and all of a sudden their school's not free anymore, and they probably couldn't afford to go in the first place. And so that becomes a big issue. If you guarantee these scholarships, does that end up now with people who kind of take for granted what they have, which is this free education that they're supposed to be getting? I personally believe that a full ride scholarship for your participation in an extracurricular activity would be an even trade. However, I do know for a fact that, especially with like academic students, certain academic students, the very big full ride scholarships offer stipend money, where you have just kind of a little bit of spending money for books, for clothes, for food, for some basic necessities, a little bit of fun, but we're not talking, $1,000 a week. We're talking like a couple $1,000s for an entire semester of school, about 3 months. And I think that I would see that being a more likely thing, where the bargaining gets to the point where the scholarships just contain things like that, those stipends, and contain guarantees, so that when a player really busts his butt for the team, even if he's a backup and he gets hurt, he's still going to get his education because that was what was promised to him. I think that's where there's a problem with the NCAA and the fact that they don't really do anything to protect those athletes who get promised these scholarships, and then when something goes bad and their scholarship's gone, nobody's there to catch them and help them out, and then we get the guy working at Burger King like Joe talked about. And ultimately, we need to, if we're going to say that we're giving somebody an education, that needs to be the focus. They need to get the education. And, I don't care what the education is in. I don't care if they want to take basket weaving 101 because that's what they want to do, or if they want to become a business, brilliant entrepreneur and take every difficult econ class on the planet. But bottom line, I think, is ultimately there's a million alternatives as for ways to get athletes extra money. And ultimately, it's going to come down to, I think, a lot of what this first group of student athletes that have unionized is going to do. I think we're going to see unions pop up around the country now for different sports. I think that's going to be a problem. And I think ultimately we're going to have to see the NCAA kind of fold in on itself and collapse, and a new creation of either unionized sports within college, either all college players of all college sports unionizing together, or some kind of a change in the NCAA policies allowing for a little bit of extra to be given to an athlete if the athlete earns it, if somebody determines that that's what they should get.
Words don't do it justice. The last Monday of every month at 2:30.
It's certainly a complex issue, and the funny thing is it doesn't get any less complex going forward. definitely, I think going forward, we have to look at what is not necessarily just possible, because I think that a lot of things are possible, but what is going to have the least dramatic effect on the college students as students and the college students as the athletic product they put on the field. Because one of the things that we talk about only to a small degree is that if you're on an academic scholarship and you get a 4.0, you don't get a bonus. There's no, major addition for your academic achievements. And there are far more athletic scholarships at just about every school in the U.S. than there are academic scholarships. Granted, to some degree, the athletic product pays for those academic scholarships, but that's not always the case. Schools with large endowments don't have that problem. So we have to figure out a way to balance that, because as you both talked about earlier, the jealousy between which college student athlete gets more money is a real issue if you start paying players. But what about the jealousy between regular students who are not athletes and those athletic students? But to kind of wrap this topic up, we're going to give everybody just a quick minute for a last point. Chris, we'll start with you, and then we'll do Joe.
Yeah, well, Matt, you really covered a lot of my last point. It is the idea of understanding the complexity of the issue. Currently practicing law, I really see so much potential for so much court time in the future for the NCAA and all these schools, and it's going to get a lot more distasteful in the way things are handled than before it gets any better. And I think that's the big thing that we need to prepare ourselves for. This is a Pandora's box. It is now officially open. An official agency of the government has said you can do this and deserve to get compensation for it, or at least a bargain for compensation. It'll be interesting to see if all the schools just try to lock them out and say, no, we're not going to pay you, and nobody's going to pay you, and deal with it. We could see strikes of sports. I mean, wouldn't that be the weirdest thing if right now here we are talking in the middle of March and there is no March Madness? And then what does the NCAA do? Do they flip out because all of a sudden billions and billions of dollars in revenue is gone just like that? Because students said, nope, don't want to play. So, and then on top of all that, we have to compete with the fact that there are people out there who will play the game for the love of the game, no matter how many injuries they take, because they love the game. And they don't care whether they get paid or not. They just want to play the game. And so ultimately, there is just going to be so many different sides to this issue that I think this is long from being settled. But I do believe that it will eventually end in kind of some form of crumbling of the NCAA organization as we see it. It may even get to the point where the government has to step in and say, you know what, just like with the Department of Education, this all now falls under education and rules need to be changed.
All right, Joe, it's your show.
Basically, I don't think they need to get paid, but another alternative would be a good thing. Maybe, an allowance, that was proposed before, but even then, that can get on a shaky slope with the whole flat fee thing. That can go down a wrong way. The other thing is, y'all understand, you're doing an extracurricular activity. Unless sports is your whole dream and goal, and that's what you want to do, you want to go pro, then either you go straight from high school. If you're trying to get paid and you're all about money and all honesty, go straight from high school. If you're trying to go to the NFL, of course you got to do your 2 years. Do your 2 years, go. Get your associates and go. But if you're in school for the education, then getting paid for sports should be the last thing on your mind. This should be something that you love doing and you do for fun. When I played in high school, we did 2 days. We gave our bodies up. True, it's a different bracket in the NCAA, but at the same time, no one's going to sit here and pay you for playing something that you voluntarily do. You know, this is not a job. This is your education. This is your future. That's about all my take on it.
All right, definitely a complex issue, but one that I think people, no matter whether you played sports or not, I think everyone has a very strong opinion about it, and that's why we wanted to start off the podcast with talking about it, because it's so poignant at the moment and also so intensely debated. Not really hotly, folks don't get up in arms about it too much, but definitely a highly debated topic. For me personally, I'm of two minds on the issue, and the real problem for me is I know college student athletes from both before when I was in college and while I was in college, and there's some who just who family couldn't give them the money, they couldn't get a job, and they were basically beholden to the school, but they weren't on full scholarship, and that it seems wrong to me on a lot of levels. And yes, though I'm not licensed yet like Chris is, the law student who's got his JD in me says this is a bad idea and we need to fix it. But fixing it is the other problem I have, because fixing it is paying students to play a sport that's supposed to be, as Joe said, an extracurricular activity. You're paying for something that you should want to do, and that we've said so far. Maybe the solution is making a separate trade school portion. You know, everybody has like their university has the College of Arts and Sciences, the College of Business, the College of the different sciences. Maybe the solution is a trade school to where these student athletes are in a situation where, by nature of how these trade schools portions of their university are set up, they are learning whatever they wanted to learn towards their normal degree, but they are also able to work in that trade school in sort of so maybe a work study type program where they're getting some living money, but they're not working for outside entities that could cause undue influence on the students. Because that's what we're really talking about when we talk about paying athletes. We're talking about people who are at the university in positions of power and people who are outside the university, famously folks like the SMU boosters, paying college athletes to have more influence over them. Bookies, both on school and not on school. I mean, I think every college has their on-campus bookie, and other nefarious organizations having influence over the sports in college because the players can get paid by them and it'd be okay. And yes, we want to prevent that, but we also want to prevent the kid from, middle of nowhere, Arkansas, going to school at Ohio State, and he was dirt poor before he got into school, and his family can't afford to send him money like the rich kid, like Johnny Manziel's family can give him money. So he needs to be able to access money in some fashion just to be a normal college student. I wish I could say I had the answer to this one, but that's not really my thing. I tend to give you more questions instead of more answers. So I would love to discuss this one further, but unfortunately words don't do it justice. We'll be right back, however, with our second topic for today. That's the MGTOW, Men Going Their Own Way movement. Is it a good thing for society? Is this a bunch of misogynists? Is this actually something that could benefit both the masculine male movement and the feminism movement? We'll talk about that next with our guests Joe and Chris. We'll be right back.
Don't forget to check out Words Don't Do It Justice at WDDIJcast March. Words Don't Do It Justice, brought to you by 314 Publishing and Imperial Dreams Productions. Words Don't Do It Justice, the last Monday of every month at 2:30.
We are back. You are listening to the Words Don't Do It Justice podcast. This is the first ever Words Don't Do It Justice podcast, and I am your host, the Ruthless Wonder, not a Ruthless Wonder. Along with me, my friends Chris and Joe, we just got done talking to you guys about paying college athletes. I thought it was a really great discussion. The fellas really, really brought some great points home. But we're going to get to the controversial topic for this week. And here it is, the Men Going Their Own Way movement. Now, apparently, according to them, this is not a misogynist movement. According to them, this is about men doing, choosing, living for themselves. But let's give you guys a quick definition according to Urban Dictionary, because I love those for being so hilarious. Men going their own way. MGTOW is basically the statement of self-ownership and saying that only you have the right to decide what your goals in life should be. It is saying that, as a man, I will not surrender my will to the social expectations of women and society, because both have become hostile against masculinity. Now, of course, there's other definitions on Urban Dictionary. We'll give you one of those that's actually funny before we give you my favorite one on Urban Dictionary. Acronym for men going their own way. These are men that give corrupt divorce courts the middle finger by not getting married, thus never getting screwed over. Traditionalist men tend to make fun of them up until the day their ex-wife steals his heart and his money, then MGTOWs get the last laugh. Now, this last one is the funniest definition I found. And fellas, before we really get into the subject, I want you guys to react to all three of these. Men going their own way. A bunch of whiny douchebags who can't get girlfriends because of their blatant hatred of women, but claim it's because they're protesting against the unnamed evils that women routinely commit. See cognitive dissonance. Instead of actually going their own way, MGTOWs spend excessive amounts of time complaining on the internet about how women have driven society to ruin while they masturbate in their mom's basements and do nothing to contribute to society. Some claim that they don't hate all women, just those uppity Western women. They'd be perfectly fine with dating one of those exotic, submissive Eastern women who would do anything they asked. See stereotype. It's the equivalent of a 5-year-old trying to hold their breath until they get what they want, only they're being incredibly unclear about what it is they want, and no one cares if they pass out from oxygen deprivation. I told you the last one was going to be hilarious. Now, fellas, quick thing. I know you all hadn't researched MGTOW as much as I had, because I did a lot of research just to find out exactly what in the world it was after hearing the stray term. So, fellas, please go ahead and give your reactions to the MGTOW movement. And we'll start with... Oh, we're starting with Chris.
Oh, goody. So I get to respond to the definitions first. Oh, where do I begin? First off, I will say, I don't know if it gives us more cred or less cred that we used Urban Dictionary to cite what this means, but nevertheless, use of Urban Dictionary is always approved in any time. As far as thoughts on the MGTOW movement, as our host alluded to, I was not very read up on the topic. I tried to do a little bit of research, found a lot of confusing stuff because it sounds a lot like one of those definitions where there's not really a lot of clarity as to what the movement itself supposedly wants or what it supposedly stands for. It's hard. We kind of had a joking conversation off the podcast about how, you know, who are the dudes that are really supporting this movement? Are these a bunch of lonely dudes sitting around by themselves, or is this, you know, a bunch of guys that get so many girls left, right, sideways every night of the week that they can afford to be like, yeah, I'm my own man doing my own thing. So it's kind of a weird way to just create it almost feels like the weird way to create something of a movement for men, since women have feminism. Some guy was like, well, we need something too, so we're going to call it this. And there seems to be a lot of cool ideas behind it. Obviously, the first definition from Urban Dictionary sounds like something that almost anybody should agree with. You should want to make your own decisions, control your own life for yourself, not for others. But certainly there will be men who are married with families who would look at you and tell you you're crazy, and they do everything for their family, and that's just the way they function. So I think it kind of catches a lot of different angles when you look at it from the perspective of a father versus a single college man. So I think it's an interesting idea in theory. I'm not sure exactly where they're going with it in practice.
Yeah, we used Urban Dictionary to be funny. I wasn't really taking that one seriously. Where we're going to talk about the actual MGTOW definition from their main website, although there are many MGTOW forums where they get to whine together. So, Joe, go ahead and give your first impression.
My first impression was like, am I watching Al Bundy from No Man make his comeback? Like, it literally seems like a bunch of whiny guys going, you know what? Let's start our own group since these women want to be uppity. I feel like the term "these uppity women" is used so much in these meetings. Is honestly what gives actual men a bad name. It's just terrible. I'm laughing at every definition that you've told me, and I can't even focus because what. Literally, I feel like there's this like old lonely men drinking beer, sitting in the basement, and they're just complaining. They're complaining and they're saying, "I'm single because no woman." So is this serious, Matt? Please tell me this is not serious and this is actual joke. Al Bundy doing the No Man speech. That's all it is. It's Al Bundy and his crew. They're running up together. They're complaining about women that they'll never get, and it's a No Man speech.
Well, I can't totally disagree at all with that assessment. I think the first article I read about it after someone brought it up in another forum and Facebook group that I belong to. Once they brought it up, I wanted to see what in the world it was. And having done so, yeah, it just reminded me of every No Man meeting that hopped up on the old Married with Children show. I would almost say that might be the genesis of why it's become a thing now. Those guys, boys who were the age that were watching Married with Children are now men who can remember it fondly, and maybe that's what the issue is. But to be quote unquote fair, I don't know when I've ever actually been fair, but to be quote unquote fair, let's get the mission statement from A Voice for Men, Humanist Counter Theory, the head currently of the MGTOW movement. The men's human rights movement is a complicated and often misunderstood phenomenon. We addressed a wide variety of issues that affect men and boys, and ultimately women, as well as the culture as a whole. Additionally, there is a great deal of disinformation about the movement on the internet and in mainstream media. With that in mind, we suggest some of the following reading materials, as a simple mission statement is not sufficient to fully explain our purpose and objectives. And then they go into a very long bit, but let's get to the real mission statement. It is the mission of A Voice for Men to promote the dissemination of information that will expose misandry and gender centrism on all levels of our culture. Oppose any form of gender centrism. We propose to foster the equal valuing of men and women socially, regardless of sexual orientation and identity, as well as their equal treatment under the law. Recognize the institution of marriage and the family unit as a foundation of civilized society. However, we support the trend away from that institution until the current legal zeitgeist making it unsafe for men and children is corrected. We support an end to no-fault divorce and support default shared physical and legal custody in the event of divorce. We seek to promote awareness of information designed to protect men and fathers who are already married. We wish to promote a rejection of sex-based chivalry in any form or fashion. Promote the legal and nonviolent antagonism of all agents of misandry and gender centrism, from members of the Academy to holders of public office, to law enforcement and other state functionaries, to popular bloggers and corporate agents who promote misandry and gender centrism for profit. Support peaceful acts of civil disobedience when necessary. Educate men, women, girls, and boys about the threats they face in feminist governance and promote an end to that governance. Debunk sex-based lies and distortions whenever they occur. Offer a more reasoned, cogent, and intellectually honest view of sexual politics. Address the variety of problems faced by men and boys under feminist governance and attempt to ameliorate those problems. Push for an end to rape hysteria, domestic violence hysteria, and false allegations. Promote a culture that values equal treatment under the law for all human beings. Facilitate a new social contract between men and women, leading to mutual respect, accountability, and expectation. AVFM's sole ideology is compassion for men and boys that is equal to that of women and any other identified group. Now, they list a lot more stuff that backpedals away from this idea that men going their way means women can F off, basically. But we'll save that for, if we ever come back to the subject in the future. Fellas, I want to get your thought about this as an overarching issue in society. So, 2 questions, answer them both. One, is there a need for a sort of a men's rights advocacy group like this MGTOW movement? And 2, is there a benefit to society? Is it good for society that a men's rights organization like this exists, and specifically MGTOW exists? Is that a good thing for society? So since we started with Chris the first time, we'll start with Joe. Joe, go ahead.
Don't forget to check out Words Don't Do It Justice at WDDIJcast.com.
No, it is not a good thing that societies like this exist, because that's another thing that we need. We need something else that gives you a label. Just like you want to have odds in this movie and all that. The fact that you got to put a label on to describe what you are, that cuts out the whole equality thing right there. You're separating yourself again. I understand that men want to be equal, just like women want to be equal, but your whole mission statement, your whole idea it just sounds dumb and misogynistic, just to be honest. It's like literally you're one step away from just saying, "Woman, shut up and watch my draws." That's literally that's the general feel of the movement and everything that they're talking about.
I'm sorry, that was really funny. Yeah, it really does seem like the shut up and make me a sandwich argument. Chris, please go ahead with your thoughts on question 1 and question 2.
All right, sorry about that, Matt. Can you go ahead and just repeat question 1 and question 2 for me really quick?
Well, question 1 is, do you think a men's rights advocacy group, specifically MGTOW, is needed in our society currently? And do you think men's rights advocacy groups are good for society, specifically MGTOW?
Okay, well, quickly, just to describe my background in some of this area, I did a lot of domestic violence work while in school, so I definitely have seen the family court system at its finest or unfinest, depending on the day. I've seen guys that get screwed, I've seen guys that got what they deserved, and I've seen guys that got away with a lot. And so, as far as the need for a men's movement, that's really hard to say that we as men need any kind of movement to be a strong group, a strong gender group. We're still very much in a society where men hold a large amount of power and decision making within the society, and so it's really hard to argue that we're in need of some kind of societal protection. It's definitely different, to say the least. Ultimately, as far as is it a good thing to have such, I think discussion is always a good thing. I think anytime that somebody brings up a topic where they feel there's an area that's being missed, or they feel that something's being overlooked, it's always good to have those discussions, to have those eyes. More eyes and ears on the topic mean more solution-oriented possibilities for that topic. But I don't know if that means that this was necessarily something that was needed to begin with. I know we heard the joke about the shut up and make me a sandwich kind of attitude, and I mean, we obviously know in this day and age that kind of argument doesn't fly at all, and so we all kind of understand that there needs to be a mutual respect among the genders. If the idea behind the movement is really just to try and help foster the mutual respect between the genders, saying that maybe feminism has taken it a bit too far to the point where men are starting to get a little bit of disrespect from the movement, some of the labels that get slapped on men, the ideas that surround men, being, constantly woman hunting, womanizing, chauvinists, those sorts of stereotypes. And if this is really just to combat that, then that makes sense. That is something that needs to be done. It is something that has kind of happened over time. But in the reverse, the idea of saying we're trying to crack down on the ideas that run through the court systems, things like domestic violence and rape and the automatic assumptions against men. I've seen the system, I've worked in the system, and you don't see guys getting screwed over very often. You see guys getting probably less than they deserve as far as a punishment. Oftentimes they're not qualified to be a father, they're still going to get to see their kid, or they're very much into hurting their girlfriend, but never seem to suffer any consequence as a result of it. Are there false accusations? Sure, but you can say that there are false accusations across the board in almost every legal field. There are, false lawsuits against companies, false contract claims, false criminal cases. So ultimately, I think the big thing is this a needed thing? I don't think so. Is it something that's good for society to talk about? Sure, because I think a public discourse about any issue affecting society is always good to talk about.
Don't forget to check out Words Don't Do It Justice at WDDIJcast.com.
That's certainly a good way of, looking at it. It's very positive, forward thinking. I guess honestly, the concern I have is on two ends, like most of my discussion today. We'll start with the positive end. It is a good thing to deal with, specifically when it comes to divorce, the issues related to men in the system. Divorce and child support are, as Chris, I know you know from having, done the clinic in law school, there is an assumption for the mother in both cases, in both divorce as well as child support, in those states that are not no-fault divorce states. And that can be a dangerous thing. One of the things that we've dealt with in both the office I work in as well as in various not really clinics so much as just general forums on the subject of family law, is you deal with the fact that in many states, if a woman is cheating in a marriage and has a child, it is presumed to be fathered by the husband in that marriage, unless she actually admits to cheating and forces a paternity to be determined. And in fact, there are many rules within that structure that could use revamping. But I think at the same time, you have a good point in that I don't know that a group like men's human rights advocacy, as specifically MGTOW, are necessarily needed deeply in our society as it is now, because to a large degree, those problems are easier to pick out and take care of. They're not Like you don't see, women going in and getting $1 billion judgments against their ex-husbands in the form of alimony and child support. That just doesn't happen as often. But there is a need to deal with the fact that there are women who still get alimony for a 2-year marriage 5 and 6 years later because they refuse to get married. But why is that? And those things can be done with just dealing with some of the inefficiencies in our legal system as it is anyway. That's not really necessarily just an MGTOW issue. So let's kind of introduce hypothetical. Let's kind of get it more into the more open discussion of this topic, which is what we're going to do anyway. And let's go to Joe, and then we'll go on into the rest here. Joe, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. So, how do you feel about the fact that there's sort of both that issue with, what they want, some of it being actually fairly reasonable, and some of it not being? I mean, one of the things they said was they want to support all genders. Excuse me, they want to support the idea of marriage, but are choosing not to involve themselves in marriage until it's more equally, handled, both legally and in society. What do you think about things like that? That sort of mix of fairly good points and craziness, as it were.
It makes a good point, but in the way that they're wording it and saying that they want, it really makes them sound like a bunch of assholes and dumbasses, just to be honest. I mean, I think I read one article was like, oh, if you want to have sex with a woman, but you gotta be in a relationship and all that stuff, then they're not gonna do it because it's like you're bowing down to feminism. No, you're bowing down to equality. Like, you want equality, then first of all, why are you called men going their own way? That doesn't make sense. Why not just say people going their own way? If you want equality, you need to include everyone. That's not equal. That's the whole thing. You got all these different groups such as that, and they have these all gender labels. Not no equality there just because you labeled it, feminist, not equality. Misogynist, not equality. Men going their own way, damn sure not equality. And even though they make good points, I mean, there's personal points that I agree with. It should be equal in marriage. It should be equality in relationship. But there, it's almost coming off like a threat. It almost comes off as like, you know what? I'm not gonna fucking marry you until I know that this shit won't happen because we're equal. I mean, I know I'm young. I'm 25, but I'm pretty sure that's called getting to know a woman and making sure that she's the one for you. At least that's what I thought it was. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. But organizations such as that, they're not needed. It's just giving a group of people a voice, and then they're gonna attract the wrong people because they're trying to have a different message when it's all the same. It's all about equality. But instead, you just sound like a bunch of misogynist pricks.
To a degree, though, isn't the counter to that feminism is generally seen as only welcoming women only, except for the few men who seem to be submissive to the idea of feminism and downplay their masculinity?
I mean, feminism has its issues too, just like the whole fact that there's actually a group, I think they're in Milwaukee, either Minnesota, that they're feminists and they don't allow guys. They don't allow men to come in and talk and preach and help out. It's all about, it's that stereotypical, I am woman, hear me roar. So now this group kind of comes off as like, I am man, hear me roar. And it's not going to do nothing but clash. It's not going to do nothing but keep those gender stereotypes and those gender battles going head to head. And it's going to make actual women and men like ourselves look bad.
Words Don't Do It Justice, brought to you by 314 Publishing and Imperial Dreams Productions.
Oh, okay. I can go with that. But what about what you just said? You basically bring up the example of extremity. Now, I kind of constantly talk about in my blog posts about how I hate extremity. But isn't the idea that any movement's going to have those far more extreme and unreasonable members, men in this MGTOW thing, men who essentially either use women or stay so far away from women as to basically become hermits, and in the case of feminism, women who disavow all contact with men and become functionally, if not sexually, same-sex oriented. What about that effect? And Chris, feel free to unmute your mic and come on in on this discussion as well. What do each of you think about sort of that idea that the extremity of this issue is really as much to be dealt with as the more reasonable folks? Because one of the blog posts, and I've started to take a look at this blog, Men Going Their Own Way, at blogspot.com. I've started to look at them just to kind of get an understanding of someone who's allegedly more reasonable on the subject. When I first got into the research for this, they were one of the blogs that came up as a place to kind of see both the fringe and the reasonable. So what do you guys think about sort of this being the extreme counter to extreme feminism? And like I said, Chris, we'll go with you first.
Yeah, that it does seem to kind of be that way, and I think that's the very dangerous part about the entire thing is the extremists. To take it, the big broader step, when we look at something like religion, most of the time you don't have a problem with any person who just practices the religion and believes in what they believe and would like others to believe it. We'll tell them why they believe it, but not necessarily force it upon someone else. Or you have the extremists like the individual who was close to my location here in Lenexa, an individual named Fred Phelps, who, thank goodness, is gone from this earth now, who spouted some very, very vitriol, terrible, extremist thought processes.
Real quickly, I know it's Sunday, but fuck Fred Phillips and the Westboro Baptist Church.
Here.
Yeah, fuck them. They give Christians bad names.
I agree, and that is my point. Is those individuals, those extremists, gave a large group of people bad names. And I'm worried that some of these extremists of this MGTOW movement are going to basically, like Joe kind of talked about, start a clash with the extremists of feminism when so much ground has been made in the idea of men being a little more cognizant of the way they treat women and women being a little more cognizant of why men try to do some of the things they do. I think that this movement would be more fruitful if that was their goal, was to simply just try to get people to understand why are men like men. Why do we do the things we do? Why do we have to socialize in groups in certain ways with certain attitudes? And I do also think that a lot of this has to do with the awesome PC culture in which we live in now, where the second somebody says anything that's a little off the wall, somebody else gets really extreme about it. And people's feelings get hurt a little bit too easy nowadays. And so we have to watch out for these guys saying they're speaking on behalf of men who then go spout something extreme, and all of a sudden every girl on earth hates guys because one idiot guy said something. Kind of like the girl who had one bad relationship and now she's kind of ruined in relationships because of one terrible incident. And so we need to watch out that this movement, quote unquote, doesn't take it too far to the extreme, because then you do see battles. You see a line drawn and a battle of the sexes commence, and that's not where we're supposed to be headed. We're supposed to be headed towards a merger of not caring about gender or race and simply looking at a person for who they are as a person.
Joe, go ahead. I want to know what you think about that and react to that, obviously.
I agree that's exactly what's going to happen. To be honest, it's going to be that one guy that calls a woman out of her name. The woman's going to say something back, and then it's just gonna go downhill from there. One thing people have to realize is that you're so busy trying to make sure your voice is heard that you're speaking over other voices. That's not actively debating. That's not actively listening. That's not actively trying to solve a problem. Like even when I read more about this article, literally it says straight men. They let you know that the line between men is divided. So a gay man can't get in on this. So if a gay guy says yes, I want the same thing you want except for with my partner,
Quick point though.
they won't let him in.
I think the reason why it's not gay men is because gay men technically have already gone their own way. They don't have sex with women.
True. I mean, to be honest, the whole, maybe this is like the inner Joe in me, but the whole not having sex with women, I mean, it's only hurting like them. I mean, I'm not gonna stop having sex with women just because, some crap. Now this is like life threatening to me or messing with my money. That's something that's really gonna stop me.
Basically, if everybody stops eating bacon, oh well, there's more bacon for me. I got you.
Exactly. Exactly. It literally it makes sense, but there's so much flawed there, and they've gone about it the wrong way that no one wants to really listen to it. No one wants to just give it a real listen.
Makes sense. Chris, you want to hop in here real quick?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add to the idea of like the guys not having sex with women, and the only thing I can think is it may be more beneficial to the population because it sounds like some of these guys are real idiots, and I don't really want them reproducing it anyway. So just gonna toss that out there. In the end, long shot, but maybe if some of these idiots decide, no, we don't want to have sex with women because sex is a controlling thing for women, then, hey, good, better for the rest of the human race.
Again, more bacon for us if they don't want to eat me. But because I'm just having too much fun with this topic, to be honest, let's throw a sort of a wrench in the works here. On a couple of the things that they say, they're fairly correct. One of the things that they talked about is this, this nature of not necessarily marriage, but of feminized culture. We've all, as men, at some point, you've complained about the idiot dad on a sitcom, the way men get embarrassed in television and other types of commercials. Is this obviously an extreme reaction, obviously, but is this necessarily a reaction to the pendulum having swung too far the other way? We'll leave my boss nameless for the moment until he decides he wants to podcast with us. But in one of the many conversations that you were there for, Chris, we've talked before about this idea that going into the 70s, feminism was a reaction to hyper-masculine culture that gave women no true sense of self. Have the choices that have been made in America, both socially as part of the social contract, as well as legally in the legal system, as well as what we view, swung the other direction? That to swing back from hyper-masculinity, they've gone for hyper-feminism, leading towards this point now where men feel as if not necessarily they're not represented, but that their public face. Now, we're not talking about behind the scenes where checks are being cut and things of that nature, because women do still get paid less than men for the same jobs. But that the public face of men is cannon fodder to be exploited in a negative light. How many times I remember talking to somebody about yogurt commercials. If you look at the Dannon and Yoplait yogurt commercials, there's always a husband, but the husband is always surprised that the yogurt tastes like what it says on the outside of the yogurt cup, and is always being made fun of like he's an idiot before the wife comes over One of them was she was talking on the phone to a friend. She was like, "Yeah, I love the Boston cream pie and the key lime pie and the red velvet cake," and the husband's looking through the refrigerator trying to find all that stuff, passing by the row of yogurt cups that say the exact flavor she's saying. And then she gets off the phone, walks in, grabs one, and walks out, basically calling him an idiot. So what do you feel about necessarily that effect? Is MGTOW and these men's rights groups really more a public response to a more feminism-centric social and public structure? I'm not going to get into the PC topic, because I think we can save that for another podcast. But just generally, is this a response to that? Do you feel like that's what's caused this, the genesis of this, as opposed to maybe some just honestly deep-seated misogyny that sees straight, and sorry for you, Chris, straight white males saying we want our control back? Is this just another version of that? And we'll start with Chris. Since I'm picking on white guys, we're going to start with Chris first.
First off, yes, I would like my control back. But on a more serious note, not I'm just kidding. I don't want the control. I can't handle power. But on a serious note, I do think that there's actually a really, really great point in what you just said, Matt, and that was pointing out the fighting back against the kind of marketed image of men. The second you started talking about that, I started thinking about television shows and sitcoms. And the very first show I thought of was I Love Lucy. In the show I Love Lucy, Lucille Ball plays a very ditzy, very clumsy, often misguided housewife who always makes a mistake. And her husband, Ricky, always comes home and he's always yelling at her, "Lucy, you got some explaining to do." And it's always her fault. We've switched from that now. The modern sitcom now, we think of something like Home Improvement, something we grew up with, or at least me as a white kid grew up with, and Tim Allen dicking around in his tools workshop, but always breaking things and screwing things up. Or even more modern sitcoms where the wife is generally delivering the punchline off of the dad's stupid decision. And so I think there's definitely, I mean, if you look at least in the entertainment industry, there was definitely a switch from making the girl the joke to making the guy the joke. And there is definitely something to be said for why did that happen? Was that some form of response to feminism, and is it going too far? The constant jabbing that guys give their friends whenever a guy gets tied down about how, oh, we're never going to see you again. Oh, you got, the honeydew list, the list that she gave you to do this morning. You have the jokes about, to be crass, have you given her your balls yet as a present? These are things that happen, and these are modern day things that occur, and that is a little concerning for some people, because that seems to then degrade men. I mean, to talk about men losing their balls is extreme and not really cool, but we do that to ourselves. Like, we've gotten to the point now in society where men make that joke to themselves, to each other. And at what point did men decide, oh, I'm going to make fun of you for being a man, or lack of being a man because you have a woman? Why does having a woman make you less of a man, and not just as equal of a man? And so I think there's definitely a really, really, really solid point when you look at the past and how people were viewed, especially media and entertainment, versus the now. I think there's definitely a correlation, and so maybe that has prompted some response, even if that's not the sole reason or purpose behind the actual movement. It certainly is that one of those things, like I said, that I think should be brought up for discussion. Definitely.
All right, Joe, you get the last word on this particular topic, man.
To piggyback off what Chris said, honestly, it has become society to where if a man gets married and he's doing something that his lady wants to do, he's considered less masculine. Because it's all about, oh, you're not in control of your household. Because to be honest, I want to say, programmed to think that the man should be in control of the household. The man should be the breadwinner. He should be the protector. And I know myself, I've suffered with that with various girlfriends I've had, to just be the guy in charge. And the whole writing with the whole the mom making the dad look stupid and stuff like that, I do just believe there's a new form that they've just adopted, just because of the fact that a lot of women actually protest that there's not enough female writers. Look at Tina Fey. She was the first female writer that SNL ever had. And it took them to early 2000s, late 2000s, just to get that done. And they've been on air since like the 1970s. So the whole thing is just, I don't know, men are just going crazy. Like, these guys are just going insane because, oh no, I feel threatened that I'm going to lose control because a woman is in control. Like, some men just can't accept that point. Me personally, I love a good strong woman. I feel like less work I have to do. I might sound messed up, but it feels good knowing that you don't have to hold someone's hand through every step of their life.
We'll save the discussion on what type of women I'm into for another day, where I can be extremely controversial and talk about that wonderful dating subject. But we're going to go ahead and close it out for this topic. We could talk more, but words don't do it justice. So, Chris, if you give any project, anything you want people to know before we get out of this podcast, and then Joe, anything you want folks to know, any place you want them to check out, maybe where you've put up any new materials or any logic slang portions of the contest coming up. Oh, that's right. Let me go ahead and announce that on the podcast. April 12th, 2014, 11:59 p.m. is the end of the Words Don't Do It Justice first annual Idiot Hunting Season contest. We have still not gotten enough really good entries to give an actual winner. Please remember, if you find someone saying something stupid on the internet, go ahead and comment, see if they comment to give a response. Use facts and data and information. Don't use any ad hominem attacks. Bring in your friends. Make sure that they get involved. And once the idiot has been properly shouted down, changes sides and agrees with you, or you just get bored of it, make sure you take a screenshot of the entire conversation and make sure that your last comment has hashtag LogicSlayer. Email that to that's YOUR, Ruthless, RUTHLESS, Wonder, WONDER, at gmail.com, and let us know what you'd like us to publicize for you. The winner of the contest will receive a gift directly from Words Don't Do It Justice. And if you, by some miracle, take down a celebrity, pseudo-celebrity, I'm looking at you, Jaden Smith, or a politician, and I really want you to take down a politician. If you can take down any of those three, the Ruthless Wonder has a special gift for you. So, remember the Idiot Hunting Season contest. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. Let's get quick outros from Chris and Joe. Fellas, Chris first.
Yeah, listen, Words Don't Do It Justice is great blog site. A lot of really fun articles. The idea behind it isn't to just necessarily, write one single individual person's thoughts, but to write things that provoke thoughts in others. And I think that's the big key here. It's all about getting a discussion going. There's nothing wrong and there's nothing illegal with talking and writing about things that you think and feel or topics that are controversial. I would just ask for everybody out there, no matter who you are, no matter what you're doing, keep it cool, and remember that respect will get you a lot more funny responses when you keep your cool as somebody is losing theirs than going crazy and going off on them. So just everybody out there, I hope this develops some discussion about some things. But remember, keep cool while you're discussing it.
All right, and Joe, final thoughts.
All right, the Logic Slam contest, I can't enter because no one wants to battle me, so that sucks. I'm still working on that.
Did
Check
you
out
just
Words
call
Don't
out
Do It Justice.
all of the internet right now? I think you just called out all
I
the
did.
internet.
I did. They can meet me at Geek Illuminati on Facebook as a group. I co-head. Meet me on there if you want to battle. I look forward to it. I need someone who can actually make me think and make me actually try. But check out Words Don't Do It Justice. There's actually a great blog, such as Chris said. Ruthless Wonder. Yeah, he always has me thinking. And Rain Isis, she always has me wondering, am I a better person? I'm a terrible person. Maybe I should become better.
Well, folks, that's all for this podcast. Be sure to check us out once a month, every month. At the end of the month, we will be back next month with an additional roster. I can't tell you who's going to be on it because there are always going to be surprises. But for Joe and Chris, this is the Ruthless Wonder, head of Words Don't Do It Justice, and this was our first podcast. I can always tell you more, but words just don't do it justice.